Buenos días or buenas tardes. We are talking about the past tense of verbs. When you see the word preterite, el pretérito, this is talking about simple past tense, such as I looked at, I did my homework, he ate, she went to school, anything like that. Those are simple past tense. Simple past tense verbs. And this is what we're talking about here. So it's called, another word for that is the preterite. So to talk about actions that were completed in the past, use the preterite tense. And the word completed here is important. There will be another form of the past that you'll learn. To form the preterite tense of a regular verb, add the preterite endings to the stem of the verb. So for example, you have mirar. From mirar, you have miré. Yo miré. I looked. And then for ER verbs, you have the I ending. Aprendí. Aprendí. And for the IR, it's the same ending as the ER, of course, the same track. So it's escribí. I wrote. Aprendí is I learned. And miré, I looked. Now it's important to remember, you see where those accents are on those words. It's important to remember that you stress that syllable. When the accent's on there, it's very important, as we'll see, to stress the syllable correctly. So with these preterite tense, preterite verb forms, in many of these, the yo form and the usted, el, ella form, you're going to be stressing the final syllable, and in most verbs that's going to be the case, the final syllable. And since it ends in a vowel, you will find an accent written on there, because of course it breaks the nose rule. So how do you do that? Just push down, stress on that last syllable that you see in this past tense. So again, we have mire, aprendí, and escribí. Right? It's not escribí or aprendí, it's aprendí, escribí. Now, for the tu form is haste for the AR, miraste, and here you're not stressing the final syllable, you're just stressing that A or the I, as the case may be. So, miraste, tu miraste, you looked, tu aprendiste, you learned, and escribiste, you wrote. So we're dealing with the same verbs here. Now, the usted, él, and ella forms, you want to stress that final syllable as well. So you have miró, and this is where it's very important to get the stress right, because miro, with the accent placed on the I, with the stress placed on the letter I, and it wouldn't have an accent on it. It wouldn't have a written accent. It's the I form of the present tense, miro. Right? So with AR verbs, the O will come in for the third person preterite, third person singular, but you stress the O, miro. At least in most cases in these regular verbs you do. Let's look at some other ones. Aprendió. Alright, so you have the IO and the ER-IR verb form. Now this is going to be different than the yo form of the present tense, which is aprendo and escribo. So of course it's not the same. But you do want to make sure you put the I in there for the past tense third person, usted, el, ella, and also accentuate, stress the final syllable. Okay, now we move over to the plural side. We have nosotros miramos. So you see that the ARs do not change with the past and the present tense. It stays identical. Miramos. Aprendimos. You see with the ER verb, it changes to an I there. Aprendimos. And with escribir, it's the same as the present tense. Escribimos. So we are learning, present tense would be aprendemos. But we learned is aprendimos. So you have for the ERs, there is a change to look like the IR verbs. With vosotros, generally we skip over those because that's used in Spain only. However, if you are possibly going to deal with Castilian Spanish speakers, those are speakers from Spain, you may want to learn those. You can, of course, just look at these as you go, if you're curious about that. But the vosotros is a plural form for you all, and it's used for a group of friends or a group of children. However, in countries of Latin America, you will not use that at all. But here they are, just so that you have them. It would be mirasteis, aprendisteis, and escribisteis. Now, what's interesting is this is very much like the tu form of what you'll hear many people say. Generally, Mexican Spanish speakers will put an S on the tu form, on the end of the tu form, because it always has an S except for this one tense for tu. So when you hear a Spanish speaker, especially from Mexico, say for example, miraste, they're saying tu miraste, you'll hear mirastes. You'll hear the S on there, and it'll sound like the vosotros form. And if you say that, they're going to think you're using the tu form in Mexico anyway, or with Spanish speakers that are from Mexico or learned the Mexican style, pronunciation, and dialect of Spanish. Okay, so moving on, we have ustedes, ellos, and ellas. We have the Aaron, A-R-O-N, the Aaron for the AR verbs. Aprendieron, escribieron, the ERs and IRs get the same ending, of course. Oyeron, miraron, aprendieron, they learned, and escribieron. So it's quite different from the present tense here. However, you'll notice that they all end in N for the plural third person, of course. Now, so you note that AR and ER verbs that have a stem change in the present tense do not have a change in the preterite. Words, for example, like we have pensar, to think, but it goes pienso, piensas, right? The E splits to IE. Well, with the preterite, since you're not stressing that E anymore, that first syllable, then it's not splitting either. So pensé is I thought, pensaste, you thought, pensó, and so on and so forth. So it's only the present tense, only when that syllable actually gets stressed is when it splits. When the surrounding letters are just too weak to hold that E up, or an O. And so the E might become an I, it might become an IE, and the O sometimes splits to UE. But when you're dealing with the past tense, you're not going to have that because the stress is it's not going to be on that letter either. Okay, so generalmente, here's an example here of that, of how that stem change works in the present tense, but it doesn't apply in the past tense. Generalmente me pruebo la ropa antes de comprarla. Right? Generally, I try on clothes before buying it. Pero ayer no me probé los pantalones que compré. Right? But yesterday, I did not try on the pants that I bought. So you see that in the present tense, pruebo, right? Me pruebo, I try on, and you get the past tense of the same thing. Me probé, I tried it on, or I tried them on in this case. You have no spelling change. Okay, now going on to ver. Ver, to see, has regular preterite endings, but unlike those of other verbs, they have no written accent marks. So, anoche David vio una camisa que le gustó mucho. Right? Last night David saw a shirt that he liked a lot. Okay, so vio, and the reason is because there's only one syllable here, so it does not need an accent. Not in the preterite forms of ver, which are vi, which is I saw, yo vi, and then viste, you saw, vio, he saw, she saw, or you, usted saw, the formal one. And then vimos is we saw, and vieron is they saw. So no written accents for those. Verbs that end in CAR, GR, ZIR have a spelling change in the yo form of the preterite. Now these are only to preserve the sound that is made by that letter that goes before the vowel, because with the preterite you have an I there or an E, an E there or an I, so the pronunciation of the letter changes. You know that C, when followed by an E or I, in Spanish is pronounced like an S, but when it's followed by a U, an A, or an O, it's going to have a K sound. The same with pagar. Pagar, after when G is followed by A or O, it's going to have a G sound, A, O, or U, but before E or I, it's going to have a H sound. So to do that, you just put a U in there, and it becomes yo pagué. Yo pagué, I paid. Right? So you pronounce it the same way you'd normally pronounce it, but in the spelling it would adjust to preserve the sound because of the letter that comes after. And almorzar, to eat lunch, the Z becomes a C. And here's a little shortcut for you. Spanish will always avoid using Z if it can. It will avoid using Z. So when there is a vowel that will work with a C instead, Spanish will automatically change that Z to a C. Because the Z really used to mean, okay, it's a C, but pronounce it like an S. Or pronounce it like a Z. You've seen the French C with a little hook underneath it, a cedilla. Okay, that's what that meant. And so in Spanish, what happened is people just wrote basically what that little hook was. It was a little Z. And so in Spanish, it just started being written with the letter Z itself. But when you don't need it anymore, you just make it a C again. So almorzar is to eat lunch, and I ate lunch is almorcé, and the Z has changed to a C. Look at some examples here. Pagaste mucho por tu suéter nuevo, right? Did you pay a lot for your new sweater? And I'm saying I didn't pay a lot. No pagué mucho. So yeah, pagué, it's just like here with pagar. Pagué, no pagué mucho, lo encontré. I found it. Lo encontré en una liquidación. I found it on sale. Okay, so that's it for the preterite tense of Spanish verbs that are regular. There are irregular ones as well, and we will go to those and get to those later. But for now, make sure you work with these past tense forms in Spanish. Very, very important to say what you've done in the past. Gracias.